the colleagues who will be presenting their work and participating in the discussions in various ways. We also have a number of excellent papers during the conference, and I look forward to those presentations. And there is a bio and a program that I think we were circulating outside, as well as online. The theme for this year forum seeks to better understand many of the different challenges that impact on how we understand industrial development and industrial policy. From technological change to climate change, from an energy transition to skills transition, from regional trade to global value chains. The global financial crisis, or after effects of the global financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic have changed the landscape and have accentuated the economic cycles that we experience. These are but some of what we'll be engaging with during the course of this forum. Many of these issues are connected and will contribute to a changed environment that we need to grapple with. The themes and panel discussions for this year are outlined in the program, and we've again got parallel sessions that we're going to have, so there will be some hard choices to make on which ones to attend. And I want to thank the presenters for sharing their ideas and contributing to thinking in this space. The papers and discussions are on a set of interlocking issues, and we are looking forward to, well, I'm looking forward to the closing panel discussion, and hopefully our presenters there will be able to connect some of the dots on these different issues that are impacting us. It's not going to be an easy task. So we've got a great panel at the end of the conference, which I'm certain will share some very interesting insights. I want to thank a few people who've made this conference happen. It's a huge exercise to undertake a conference, and there's a strong team that makes it happen. The internal team, our program director, Lesego, who's coordinated the conference with the support of Brazil, Daphne, Butle, Nondwe, plus other staff who've pitched in on the day, and they've worked very hard to ensure a successful event. Thank you. To our research partners, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, who are strong supporters of what we do and our efforts to create discussion and insights into industrial policy, as well as our partners in the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development at UJ. These partners are important not only in support they give us, but in sitting on steering committees, engaging with us, and they bring a wealth of knowledge and provide other support. And to thank the members of the steering committee who have contributed to ensuring a high quality and very relevant program. And to lastly thank the TIPS Board of Directors for their support for our work. We've also got participants who've joined in online from across the world, and we hope to share your insights and that you contribute. In the room today, we have a mix of government officials, academics, researchers, people from SOCs, international organizations, private sector. So it's a nice group of people that we are seeing in the room today. And I'm looking forward to an exciting forum, and hope you'll be able to join us for most of the sessions.
Thanks, Saul. It's really a pleasure to make a brief opening or welcoming remarks this morning. And as the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development, to again be partnering in the TIPS Forum this year. For anyone who's interested in industrialization, industrial policy, trade, structural change, and related issues, the TIPS Forum has always been an important event on the calendar. And I think part of the strength and the contribution of the forum is, as Saul says, that it brings together researchers and practitioners, including people from government, universities, private sector, trade unions and civil society, research institutes, and so on. I would really encourage all participants also to take advantage of the opportunity outside of the session for discussing, for networking with people who might be working in similar fields, but from different organizations. Personally, I'm still in touch with and even collaborating with people I've met at the TIPS Forum over the years. So it's always a great opportunity for discussing even outside of the sessions. I think the theme for this year, industrial policy in an era of global structural change, as Saul said, is really apposite. There's so many key changes, some new, some not so new, that impact on industrial policy making in South Africa. changes around digitalization, green industrialization, still after effects of COVID, conflict, and so on. And it's important that both in the research and the practice of industrial policy, we grapple on an ongoing basis with the implications of these. As SARChI Industrial Development, that's the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development, based at UJ, we're really happy to again be partnering in the forum. I think it's been quite a few years now. We are one of the national research chairs, and our activities focus around research, training and capacity building, and public and policy engagement, broadly in the field of industrial development, including research on issues such as innovation and technological upgrading, trade and regional integration, various facets of industrial development, industrialization, and so on. And happy to engage with anyone who is interested in our activities. So let me stop there, and best wishes for the deliberations.
Good morning, everyone. Dumelang. My name is Lesego, and I am an economist at TIPS, and I would like to thank Fiona and Saul for the introductory remarks and also for providing us context as to why we gathered here. Our next speaker is our keynote speaker, who is Nimrod Zalk, who will give the keynote address. So in terms of about the keynote speaker, Nimrod Zalk is the former Deputy Director General of the Sector Branch of the South African Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. He also served as Industrial Development Advisor in the Office of the Director General between 2013 and 2023. Prior to that, he was the Deputy Director General of the Industrial Development Division of the DTIC. From 2009 until 2023, he was a non-executive director on the board of the Industrial Development Corporation. He's a scientific committee member of the African Program on Rethinking Development Economics, also known as APOD, and sits on the academic advisory board of the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences of the University of the Free State. He holds an MSc in economics and a PhD in economics from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. He has been appointed an associate professor at the University of Cape Town's Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. Nimrod has been involved in a range of policy, research, and academic processes related to South African and broader African industrial development and trade, including management of sector master plans, establishing the Industrial Development Think Tank at the University of Johannesburg, developing and implementing South Africa's National Industrial Policy Framework and Industrial Policy Action Plans, IPAPs, and designing key industrial policy initiatives, including various sector strategies, industrial financing instruments, and also leveraging procurement for industrial development. Nimrod is a member of Professor Joseph Stiglitz Initiative for Policy Dialogue, Africa Desk, and co-founder of APOD. Nimrod, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I'd like to thank very much TIPS for inviting me to deliver the keynote address to the 2023 TIPS Annual Forum. I'd also like to recognize the intellectual and financial partnership and contribution of the DSI NRF South African Research Chair in Industrial Development, sitting next to me, and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So this year's forum asks how industrial and other policies in Southern Africa should adapt to the effects of accelerating climate change, together with profound global economic and geopolitical shifts. I would like to argue that Southern African economies and countries on the rest of the continent need to raise both their voice and agency in the face of climate, technological, and geopolitical disruption on the international, regional, and domestic front. The North Atlantic economies, which industrialize with a high reliance on fossil fuels, account for around 53% of the cumulative stock of CO2 in the atmosphere, and accordingly, excuse me, there ought to be a corresponding magnitude of commitment of financial and other resources to decarbonization, particularly to developing countries. Africa, ironically, due to its under-industrialization, contributes to a cumulative stock of CO2 of about 3% of the global stock of emissions in the atmosphere. And yet the continent is predicted to be the most negatively affected through rising temperatures, increasing severity. It's widely recognized that developed economies tank income levels through a process of structural transformation. That is understood as the mobilization of investment and the transfer of people from low to higher productivity activities and sectors. And this process of structural transformation has occurred overwhelmingly through the process of industrialization, which includes agricultural modernization. High growth developing countries have similarly used industrialization as their primary engine of growth. Conversely, and aside from a handful of small single commodity exporters and tax havens, no countries have achieved high income levels without industrializing, or no countries that I know of. So African structural transformation in the context of climate change is thus rendered even more challenging because the fossil fuel intensive route to industrialization will become increasingly difficult. However, the agenda for Africa's positioning within the global division of labor in the green transition towards net zero is overwhelmingly being set by a range of external actors, reflecting a combination of ideas and interests. The latter being national and transnational commercial interests, which are the most visible to us. So major advanced economies, notably the US, the EU and the US, see Africa, as well as other developing countries, as sources of critical minerals that they require for their own green and digital industries, while simultaneously erecting barriers to African industrialization. And this includes seeking unrestricted exports of critical minerals, putting in place enormous subsidies for their own green and digital industries, and erecting external barriers to carbon embodied in developing country imports through carbon border adjustment mechanisms. China, the largest player in critical minerals, has not sought the kind of restrictive policy measures as the advanced economies, but rather has sought security of supply of critical minerals through the encouragement of outward investment of its large firms in the mining and transportation of the critical minerals on which it relies. Various transnational corporations have also positioned themselves to secure critical minerals along the value chain through direct investments in mineral extraction, vertical integration, and contractual supply arrangements with large commodity traders. A number of transnationals are also seeking to green themselves, in inverted commas, in order to bolster their environmental, social, and governance credentials with shareholders by offloading their old, dirty mining and industrial plants to domestic purchasers with little or no aggregate positive climate impact. And the jury is still out on whether the international carbon trading system is helping or hindering net reductions in global emissions. Far less visible, but arguably even more influential in the long run, is the way in which ideas about developmental options for Africa are framed in the nexus between climate change and development. Much of the framing of development pathways available to African countries is being undertaken by influential multilateral institutions, as well as institutions located in the advanced economies. And although not always explicit, the link between climate change and development is often articulated in a way that pays inadequate attention to the importance of structural transformation and minimizes or even dismisses industrialization as a pathway to African development. Many Northern climate activists, albeit with the best of intentions, support positions that could limit Africa's ability to transition to a green industrialization path in ways that take account of its limited contribution to climate change and the need to industrialize. And this includes uncritical support for the way in which CBAMs are structured, opposition to natural gas as an intermediate energy source on the route to net zero, as well as opposition to long-haul aviation, on which many developing countries' tourism sectors are reliant. So it's therefore essential that African countries strengthen their own idea sets around the need for and form of structural transformation they wish to pursue in the green transition, and correspondingly their own voice and agency. It's important for African countries to express this voice in a range of international fora, including advocating for a global financial architecture that is fit for purpose and contributes meaningfully to the mobilization of the estimated $1.3 trillion per annum that are estimated to be required by the continent to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. COP28 and other climate fora to ensure a stronger link between responses to climate change and African structural transformation, as well as continuing to argue for a world trading system that is developmental, even as North Atlantic countries have thrown out the rule book which they have held developing countries to, including, as I mentioned, through provision of massive subsidies for green and digital industries and erecting certain barriers to trade. However, African countries cannot wait for the international economic order to become a fairer place. Therefore, they need to bring to bear their greatest effort in pursuing green structural transformation strategies and strengthening the institutional arrangements to implement them. This includes, and this is by no means exhaustive, taking advantage of the dramatic reductions in the costs of renewable energy to provide green electrification for households, agriculture, and light industrial and commercial applications, and associated manufacturing and service opportunities. Leveraging their endowments of critical minerals in ambitious but realistic ways. This includes adding value where feasible, building regional value chains, and leveraging this endowment to attract investment. Expanding light and medium manufacturing in more resource-efficient ways to supply national, regional, and broader export markets, as well as, and I think this is going to be a particular area of difficulty and contestation, is how African countries establish heavy industries, which we know are hard to abate, and which even the advanced economies have not yet fully commercialized the technologies to produce green steel and other metals and chemicals. It also includes the modernization of agriculture. This is both to address food insecurity, as brutally exposed by the impact on grain availability and prices of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and for the export of high-value agricultural products for the global market. This also includes the development of ancillary service industries, including logistics, cold chain, and engineering services linked to these activities. It will be very important on the institutional front, in particular, to scale up and capacitate African development banks to partner with private investors on the one hand and multilateral financial institutions and instruments on the other, in order to mobilize the finance and the project development and execution capabilities that are required for green structural transformation. As always, the TIPS Annual Forum provides a platform for a combination of young and more established academics to present their most recent research. This year's forum promises an interesting and diverse range of papers that I'm sure will help inform the debates and policy options for green structural transformation in Southern Africa. Thank you.